Welcome back to the second part of this video series, where I'm going to show you the painting process of this Fyreslayer dwarf. In this episode, I'll be focusing on unifying and finalizing the dwarf's skin. I hope this tutorial is not only enjoyable for you, but also provides you with useful techniques and tips that you can apply in your own creations. Without further ado, let's get to it. To achieve a unification of the skin and soften the contrasts in the areas that require it, I'm going to use glazes. This technique involves applying extremely thin and translucent layers of paint, allowing for a subtle and precise integration of tones. I start by mixing paint and water in equal proportions, aiming for an almost liquid consistency. A crucial aspect here is to properly unload the brush before applying the glaze. This gives me optimal control over the amount of paint and its precise placement on the figure. The second key point is the delicacy in the application. Imagine you're caressing the figure with the brush, using just half the pressure I would for base layers. This approach allows me to deposit a patina of paint exactly where I need it, granting me total control over the placement of lights and shadows. This first shadow glaze not only unifies the figure tonally, but also reduces the contrast between the brightest areas and the shadows, integrating all the muscles into a skin that looks more coherent and smooth. Although it may seem a bit dirty at first, this is corrected with a second light glaze, which further refines the finish. Remember, you're applying an ultra-thin film of color to your miniature transparent enough that the underlying details remain visible. This technique creates a depth and dimension effect unachievable with opaque layers. I'm at a critical point in the process, the application of a second glaze. This time, I'm going to use the lightest tone I used for the final sketch. It's important to remember the significance of properly unloading the brush before dipping it into the glaze. Pay attention to how this time I'm applying the brush strokes from the shadowed area towards the light. This approach is intentional, as it allows the paint to gradually build up towards the area of maximum illumination. By doing it this way, I achieve a more natural and smooth transition between the tones, creating a more realistic lighting effect on the figure. This type of brushstroke is particularly useful for emphasizing the contours and most prominent features, ensuring that the light is focused exactly where I want it. One of the great benefits of glazing is its ability to smooth transitions between different colors and tones, an essential aspect in miniatures, where we want changes in tone, especially in the skin or clothing, to look natural and fluid. Remember, patience is key when it comes to glazing. Each layer must be completely dry before applying the next one. This process might take some time, but the results are definitely worth it, as it creates transitions that blend and flow naturally. Finally, I believe that glazing isn't a technique to be used indiscriminately over the entire figure. It's rather a specific tool, perfect for adding that extra touch of softness and control when necessary. Therefore, I recommend reserving it for those special moments when it's really needed. Now, let's move on to using the airbrush, a key tool in this process. I'll use it to restore the saturation that was lost during the sketching phase, giving our figure the characteristic gray-violet tone of the Black Iron Dwarves. For this, I'm going to use a violet ink. This ink is so rich in saturation that I'll dilute it in a ratio of 20 drops of water for every drop of ink. When applying the paint, I'll tilt the figure and direct the airbrush from below, making sure that each pass primarily affects the shadowed areas. For now, I'll be careful not to overdo the light planes, like the shoulders and the upper part of the arms. I'll focus on areas such as underneath the arms, the lower limbs, under the chest, and the hands. Each pass with the airbrush should be short and precise, avoiding flooding the miniature with too much paint. I hope you have an airbrush at hand. If not, I highly recommend getting one. In the world of miniature painting, an airbrush is a revolutionary tool that not only saves you time, but also allows you to achieve smooth and elegant finishes, which are hard to reach with a brush in a reasonable amount of time. You don't need to invest in an expensive model at the start, but in the medium term, I suggest considering a higher quality one, like a Harder and Steenbeck or an Iwata. If you're unsure about how to use this tool, don't worry. I'll be making specific videos soon about its features, uses, maintenance, models, brands, accessories, and more. To complete the process, I'll do one final, gentle and even pass over the entire miniature. This step helps me to further unify the entire skin surface. At this stage of the process, I've realized that, due to the use of the airbrush, I've lost some of the detailed work I did earlier on the muscle sketch. To solve this, I'm going to reinforce and retrieve those details in the areas of maximum light. To do this, I'll apply a glaze using the lightest tone from the previous mix. It's important to remember, brush strokes should move from the more shadowed areas to the more illuminated ones. Additionally, I'll take this opportunity to highlight some extra textures like scratches and imperfections on the hands. Now, I'm going to do a wash with red ink to accentuate certain areas of the miniature. I'm aiming for intense saturation, so I'll carefully dilute 1 drop of red ink with 3 drops of water. I'll apply this wash quickly but precisely, focusing on body parts that would naturally take on reddish tones due to blood accumulation, like the elbows, hands, ears, face, feet, and knees. This technique adds not only realism but also depth and character to the figure. In this particular case, where I've chosen a rather grayish skin tone for the dwarf, it's crucial to emphasize signs of life through careful use of red. This choice is key to conveying that, despite his pale skin tone, blood is flowing vigorously through the dwarf's veins. In future videos, I'll delve into the psychology of color to explore more deeply how these subtleties affect our perception of the figure and the visual narrative we create when painting miniatures. After assessing the result, I see that the red saturation isn't quite enough. To fix this, I'll switch to a brighter, more vivid red, applying it strategically to further enhance those selected areas. To wrap up, I'll revisit and highlight some details from the initial sketch on the hands, ensuring that they stand out and contribute to the overall effect I'm aiming for. These details add a touch of realism and character to the figure, making each aspect of the miniature tell its own story and reflect the rugged nature of a warrior in battle. To wrap up this tutorial, let's tackle one of the most expressive aspects of any miniature, the eyes. I'll start by applying a base layer of a light tone, making sure not to use pure white in order to maintain some depth and naturalness. The next step is to apply a layer of undiluted red ink. This choice is perfect for capturing and conveying the intensity and fury of the Fyreslayer in the heat of battle. The red in the eyes brings a liveliness that reflects the contained anger and ferocity of the character. Painting the eyes of miniatures is a process that requires precision and attention to detail. To make this task easier, it's highly recommended to use visual aids like magnifying glasses or a loupe. While it's possible to paint without them, especially if you have excellent eyesight, using these tools not only improves the quality of the outcome, but also protects the health of your eyes, avoiding unnecessary strain and effort. With great care, I'll add a small dot of white, which will serve as a base for applying a touch of pure yellow, giving the eyes a special brightness and enhancing their expressiveness even more. And with the eyes of the miniature now painted, let's go to the summary of the key points of this tutorial. Before applying the glaze, make sure to remove any excess paint from your brush. Apply the glaze with very light pressure to achieve the best results. After using the airbrush, it's crucial to recover any lost volumes. This step is essential when using this tool and helps to maintain the depth and detail of your work. To add realism to your figure's skin, apply red tones to key areas such as the joints, cheekbones, and nose. This will give it a more natural and convincing appearance. I hope you found this tutorial helpful and inspiring. I'd love to read your comments, so don't hesitate to leave them below. I'll do my best to respond to each one. If you like what you've seen and want to support my channel, consider making a small contribution through Patreon or joining as a channel member and turning on notifications so you don't miss any new content. See you in the next episode.